incorporating Harrison students into our existing school culture. We are really building a new Farmington High School and a new North Farmington High School where everybody has a place. And certainly our staff is adjusting to that and dealing with some changes that are coming for them, and our students as well. But we're confident in the end this is going to be a smooth transition. I'm looking forward to help answer any questions you have tonight.
I'm also on the transition team as principal at Harrison. I will say I've really enjoyed this short time I've had at Harrison, working with Mr. Green and Mr. Shelton. I want to assure you as parents that we are working together. We communicate probably every day for some aspect of this transition. So our goal is to make this easy for our staff, but most importantly for your students. We want it to be something that it's a transition. There's difficulty with any transition, but we want our students at Harrison and also Farmington and North to really build that new culture. So we're working hard together as principals to make it as easy as possible. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well today.
I'm Polly Bosch-Rouge. I'm now, as of last September, moved to East Middle School to start the IB Middle School program called MYP, and we were just authorized as a candidate school this past week, so I'm very excited about that. But prior to this, I was at Harrison High School with the International Baccalaureate program, getting it started there. And we just graduated our fourth class last year and our fifth class this year. So.
Good evening. I'm Linda Fox. I'm the athletic director for the district.
With that, we'll go ahead and get started on some question and answer. The first question, whoever would like to answer.
I'll be ready to pass the mic.
Yeah, you can jump in. How is parking going to be handled? At Harrison, the students have assigned parking. At Farmington, it is first come, first served, and creates extra stress and trying to find a parking spot. Will Farmington High School change to assigned parking spots?
Thank you for the question. So at both North, correct? At both North and Farmington, we have non-assigned parking spots. Parking spots are first come, first served. We actually moved away from assigned spots to the open spots, I believe 2 years ago at Farmington, and it was due largely to other issues that arise with assigned spots. We find it's honestly a great motivator to students to get to school on time and even get there a little early. And it helps us manage capacity in our parking lot too. So we've not had issues with our students with any of those issues, and we'll help our Harrison students coming to us to adjust to that new system. Anything you want to add to that, Joe?
Thank you.
Wait, on parking though, it's the same subject. I don't care whether they get them assigned or not, I don't really care. But when if kids going to Farmington, if they, is there a hierarchy? Like when I was in high school, we were packed, so seniors and juniors, and is that how it works, or is it?
So
right now, Harrison, anyone who wants one can have
correct.
it, because we diminished, but I don't know what.
Correct. That's also the situation at Farmington right now as well. I'm guessing in the fall, we've not made a firm decision on this, but I'm guessing in the fall we will sell parking passes to our seniors and juniors first, and then manage capacity, and if we're able, we'll establish a priority to sell passes to our sophomores. It has been open season. We'll probably have to be a little more restrictive next year, obviously seniority and age based.
For what it's worth at North, we right now start each year selling them to juniors and seniors only, and then once we kind of get a handle for what the flow of that is, when we get to second semester and we have sophomores who start picking up their licenses, then we start to open it up slowly to sophomores as we have availability, and then as we get closer to when seniors leave, we reduce the price and often allow new drivers to be able to come in and drive at the beginning as we have room. But both lots are going to fill up fast.
And just to add one more comment to that, that is to bring those two questions together. One of the advantages of not assigning spots is we get more capacity out of it, right? Because you have every day a certain number of absent students, and those spots would sit empty if you have assigned spots. Whereas if they're open, you can, for lack of a better word, oversell your parking lot a little bit and make sure you got space for everybody.
And you get to watch the seniors and juniors wandering around after school looking where they left their cars.
Exactly.
I have a question. My daughter is not going to be taking her first hour, so will the lots be filled when she gets to school?
You know, again, it's a very good question. Again, we're going to be very careful not to sell parking spots beyond capacity. She may have to walk a little bit if she's not coming to first hour because those closer spots will obviously be taken by the kids who are coming for first hour spots, but I'm confident there'll still be spots in the lot. Yeah.
Thank you. We've heard about the transition plan for May 31st. Are there options that day for students who might not fare as well in loud or large group activities?
I'll start with that one. There are options. We're working, actually, when our transition team met, a couple parents mentioned that, and we felt we want those students to feel comfortable. There may be some students who may not be comfortable on that given day because of anxiety and other issues, so we are working on setting up something where those students are not with a large group of people, that they can be supported maybe in a smaller setting. What that will look like, we aren't sure, but there will be some options for them.
This one has a few different questions listed. The first one says orientation for new students.
New to the district?
So, I'm not sure.
That's how it's new to the school.
New to the school. So again, I have to point to the agenda that we've developed for May 31st that has a lot of those common activities that we would typically cover during orientation. Students will be rotating through different activities by grade level. One of those being an activities fair in our gyms where students can experience the wide array of our athletic and activity offerings, similar to what your students experienced during freshman orientation. There's also there's some dialogue time with other students. There's a time to meet with the administrators in the auditorium for formal presentations. So all the things that you would typically associate with an orientation type program are accounted for on May 31st.
Can a student shadow a friend?
We generally leave shadowing open to folks who are new from the district. The few times where we've had friends shadow friends, it doesn't work out so well. They both tend to, even in the best behavior, become distracted, not be focused. We aren't a hard no to it, but we'd probably say the day would be better spent not doing so. If they're really, really keen on getting a feel for the building before they go, and that's part of transition, by all means, we would listen to that, but we'd ask you to have a conversation with your child to make sure that that's really what they're there and focused for so they can make the day count and make it worthwhile. The few times that we have shadowed with friends, it becomes social more than anything else. So and there's plenty of people who just being able to walk the halls once with someone they know before it all starts might be a valuable thing. Have a conversation. If your child really needs that, we'll figure a way to make that happen.
The other thing I'd add to that is, I believe the Farmington High School and the North Farmington High School that a student would experience by shadowing tomorrow is going to look a lot different than the Farmington High School and the North Farmington High School that they'll see in September. So I think that's another reason why maybe a shadow, what we want to get to the bottom of is why. You want a shadow, tell me why. And then we can try to figure out other ways to meet those needs that are maybe more effective.
Next question is, how are the seniors going to be treated?
Let me base this. It's going to be their senior year, but they're going to a new school, which means sophomores have been there for a year, juniors have been there for 2 years, but the seniors are new. And the senior year, I remember from my time, was big. You were in charge a little bit. I mean, you were in charge when you were a senior.
You were looked up to.
You were looked up. You got more, when it came to the sports, when it came to the extracurriculars, things happened. But they're going to a new school. So how are the seniors from Harrison going to be treated as compared to a sophomore Farmington and a junior from North Farmington? That the staff knows. But I just don't want, and the peers and everything that they know. I just want them, I want it to be fair for them. I want them to have their senior year. That's what I want.
So there's a very good question. We've been really deliberate in our planning and making sure that that doesn't happen, that we're welcoming those students, that we're involving them in creating this new school community that we're creating. I'll give you some concrete examples. We just held our student council elections this week at both Harrison and at Farmington, and we made the decision that, and at North as well, or?
We are going to be holding ours, and we are going to
In Cummings, well, and obviously they're following the same process that we did, which is that we're going to have co-presidents and co-officers at every level. So we're not going to have a senior class president who's a Farmington student. We're going to have a senior class president who was a Farmington student previously and a senior class president who was a Harrison student previously. The same goes with how we're handling athletic teams, and Ms. Fox may want to add to that. But again, the idea is that we're all coming together to form a new school community, and there's not, you know, the old and the new. We're just all in this together. Yeah, I know the students, and absolutely, and that's why. And that's why I think those newer leadership positions and that shared leadership is going to be a great way for us to bridge that gap.
I would add on that we've had the experience now, like I said earlier, about 60, 70 kids coming a year. So we've been through this a couple times. During Charity Week, students bid to rent a senior for a day. And one of the young ladies that just stepped in, volunteered to MC, was brand new from Harrison this year and did probably the best job we've ever had. And actually, forgive me, she's a junior, gonna be a senior, but people totally accepted her. She did a better job than any of our current students would have done. And people are like, you're doing this next year, right? And just, we've had waves of kids come in and they've been accepted. We've had seniors that, kids that transfer in for their senior year, and they've been really welcomed. They have more roots with their peers than we often think. They've gone to school with people before, or they have a connection through community organizations. So there's some other things that help them there. One other concrete thing we had talked about was with Link Crew. Kids from Harrison were able to apply to be Link leaders at both buildings. They were able to submit applications, and so we're involved in the process. And one simple thing we need to do, and this is a reminder, I got to follow up with you, Chris. We have one of our classes at North donated a big medallion of Sydney Raider, our school mascot, and it's right in the main lobby as you come down the hallway that our seniors walk out on their fanfare. The idea is that it's the last thing they touch when they walk out the door as we do our senior walkout. And so what we've requested is we want to get something from Harrison that has a hawk of similar size, that so long as we have students that attended Harrison, it will reside next to the Raider on the wall. And I don't care what you touch on the way out. The idea is just touch the place that kind of invested in you. So we might have some kids come up and they're a hawk. We might have some kids come up and touch both. We might have some kids come up and touch the Raider. It's kind of like the M at U of M's Diag. You're not supposed to touch it till you graduate, right? Little things like that we're trying to take traditions we have and morph them so that they're accessible to everybody on their terms. So lots of things like that we're thinking of to try to make it count. And our kids are very welcoming, far more than we worry, right? Because we look back as parents, but I have a lot of faith watching this happen a couple times now. They're going to take good care of each other.
Thank you. Can you please address fairness on sports teams and other extracurriculars?
I think we already did.
Okay. Sorry, when I was trying to organize my notes, so I didn't ask questions twice.
Oh.
No, not on sports. They should go sports.
Okay.
We alluded, I think it was alluded to.
We alluded to it, but yeah, I guess
It's a big one.
it is the big
It's a big one for seniors who have been.
one. It is.
So there's been a lot of discussion about making sure that things are equitable and fair. Some of the sports have cuts, so we've actually made several different processes, put them into place for next year when we're running our programs that have actual tryouts and cuts, because we want to make sure that there's not an unfair advantage to a student that's been in a certain building, and that's who the coach is. And in many cases, as you know, the coaches at the buildings have changed. So you might have a coach at Farmington High School, but they were the coach from Harrison that is now at Farmington High School, or even potentially a North Farmington coach that ends up over at Farmington High School. Now, all the Farmington students to that coach are new, and a handful of the transition. So there's a lot of different pieces in play here. So for the tryouts, we have some specific processes that we're trying to go out of our way to make sure that it's fair and balanced and equitable. In terms of the teams that are not cut sports, basically anybody who wants to be part of the team is going to be part of the team. They're going to be kind of delaying a lot of the process or adding to it in terms of captains, determining who the captains are, because they want to make sure, again, that they're expanding it and not just looking at the kids that were there last year and that's who's going to be the captain. There's actually, comparatively, compared to the number of sports that we have, many of the teams have already been unified or are already 2 teams rather than 3 building teams still. Many of the other programs are already working on their preseason conditioning and they're, you know, out of season conditioning. So you walk into any one of the weight rooms and you're going to see kids from other buildings that are in there now. They're going to be going there next year and they're already doing conditioning and workouts with the coach. So many of them are not going to see the coach for the first, are not going to be in a position where the first time they see the coach and are working with the other kids is during the season. So there is also that advantage. Did I answer your question? Yes.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I absolutely trust what you're saying to be true. I absolutely believe that you're going to, you know, go at it. I believe the principals are going at it. I cannot, and I'm not someone who, like, you know, they need to rock and roll in general, but that's one area, and I'll say it because I have a Harrison Hawk who's played 3 years of basketball, and it's a cut sport, and it's a tough, I'm just telling you, it's a tough thing. You're moving his school, and I'm not, they're gonna rock and roll, but it's gonna be a tough gig if a kid has played 3 years at one school, and North's team is a lot more, whatever it is, and you're telling a kid in his 4th year, you're not good enough to be in our team. And here's the problem for me, and I have 2, but I have kids that play year-round sports. I can name every sport. I have a kid, you know, but the basketball one for me, and I'll tell you, it's not because I have basketball kids at my house 20%. That's going to be a tough one because, especially with your seniors, because if a kid has played, just think about it, you could literally single-handedly, I have one of my sons, you could single-handedly undermine a really good kid, and I'm not lauding him, I'm just saying there's more than just him. It's football, rock and roll, you know, track and field, I got a cross country, I've been scanning it, but the basketball one, and for me the linchpin is 3 years at Harrison, cut completely out of North, or what's it called, what you do to the soul of a kid who's that, if any of you were sports guys, and you pull the pin out because it wasn't his, it wasn't because of him, it's because now he got shoved to another school and what's it called, and that is what matters to him. I just don't know, I'm just telling you, I can't tell you, you could underpin a lot of
I completely
young
understand what
men
you're
in
saying.
particular that I happen to dwell around, you could underpin a lot of, you know,
And I'll be really honest. I mean, just the reality of it is that we're going from 3 schools to 2, and in a cut sport, you're limited for the number of students. That's the reality of
and
it.
the reality will be, and I will tell you as a mom who has 10, 12, 15 young men from Harrison at my house who have been through, they have been through Wood Creek, gone to it, so some of them are at North already and they know, that's the good news of our district is that they know each other, that you'd be foolish to think if you're not fair, like the kids are going to be counting numbers, if you take 15 spots and 11 of them show up as Raiders and 4 of them show up as Hawks or 2 of them show up as Hawks on your varsity team. I'm just going to caution you again, there's 2 years that you owe to the Harrison Hawks. You owe next year and the year after because you have kids that'll be 2 years, 2 years, or 3 years, 1 year. After that, it's a wash. Rock and roll with Raiders or whatever, but that's going to be the one. And you'd be foolish to think that that's not going to cause havoc in your hallways or in your things because you know from sports, we have rivalries. We're a loving community. These are great people in the heart. But you'd be foolish to think that kids in hallways who got cut and the balance is out and the Hawks are the odd man out here and it shows up as the odd man out. You'd be foolish to not err on the side. And I say it even if my kid gets cut, err on the side of the Hawks for 2 years to make sure it's at least as close as you can get. Because you'd be foolish to think that young men and kids in the hallways are not going to talk smack or are not going to be arrogant or are not going to be cruddy and they're going to create more havoc. Then it'll be worth to put 2 more kids on that bench or 4 more, whatever it
It
is.
will affect their academics as well. We know that seniors that lost their spot on the team, they don't have a reason to go to school. You'll lose that.
I'm just around them a lot. It's like you pull the pin out of some of these kids who have played 3 years and you tell them at North or Farming you can't play on our team because we cut you. You know, I could argue
So
as an adult. I can argue as an adult.
Again, we
it's
have
not
to-
the end of your world, but
And doesn't that mess with their chances of being recruited for college?
that's not even my thing. I don't know. You know, if they're recruited, they'll make it to the team. So. I'm just telling
Yeah,
you-
I don't believe the college recruiting, I absolutely hear what you're saying.
I'm just
I,
telling you that, and I don't think it's an
I
easy
do. I
formula.
completely
I'm just
hear-
going to tell you, if it's now taught, you will have more trouble in your hallways and in your parking lots because they're rival teams, and there's no way around it. They're friendly and they're that, but that's where you will have a rumble. Is that they'll and girls too. I don't have girls, but I hear from the girls same thing. So I'm just.
Thank you. Piggyback on the sports question, how many freshman teams are you adding at the two high schools? Because like for soccer, for example.
yeah, we'll get a little more information on that as we start drawing, as we start finding out exactly how many kids are trying out for the teams. But right now, we've committed to freshman or JVB teams on both of the soccer teams at each of the building. One of the tennis teams, probably two of the tennis teams. If North's numbers grow, then they'll also be adding JVB. If we have enough kids, we can add it.
So you've got budget for that?
We, like this year, we finally ran 3 soccer teams at North. It was awesome. Like,
Yeah, well, I knew this, that's why I wanted to be sure.
Because to be honest, I was like, are we going to be able to pull this off? And there was no resistance. Honest to goodness, we were told that we would get support, we got support. So in the non-cut sports where we can fit kids in, it's about getting kids access.
We're trying to pull together more. Yeah, JVB works better than freshmen because if you have 10 freshmen and you need 11, it ain't gonna work.
Thank you. The next question is, when will you know staffing placements?
Next week, we plan to tell the teachers on the 15th together. So we met, was that last week we met? At North Farmington with our transition team meeting. And our plan is on Wednesday of next week to let all our staff members know their placements for next year.
Does that include the IB rated teachers that are?
That's all teachers.
So we'll know the physics IB and the math IB teacher is for next year?
In some cases, there may be, because of retirements or other placements, there may be need to train other teachers. But we.
Will we know who they are? You're saying we'll know who they
Yes.
are and then they can be.
On the 15th, we've committed, can you all hear me if I don't get quiet? On the 15th, we've committed to let staff members know what building they're in. Many positions will be pretty solidified. Some will still be having some moving parts, so we won't be able to tell every bit, because we still will be running a schedule at that point and figuring out where classes fall, and it may knock some things out of somebody's assignment and cause something else to fall in. We'll have a generally good idea of what people are doing, but on the 15th, we've committed to let staff know what building they'll be in, because that's kind of the thing that's gnawing their minds. And really, frankly, if they're going to have a job, that's one of the pieces.
We won't know who the IB physics and the IB math is for a while yet.
Not too long after the 15th, I would think. You should know not too long after the 15th. We're at a pretty good place right now. And so we're just trying to make sure that everybody finds out where they're going to land at the same time, that it's not coming out in dribs and drabs. That's not fair. We're going to...
Sooner would definitely get better on this because
100%.
it's such yes.
Usually you don't find out until August who you have, which has not been the best thing. We are really moving it up. We've moved things up by orders of months at this point. So you should...
Yeah, but it's a little bit different with the IB certifications. It's one thing if here's the teachers that teach math and you don't know which teacher you're going to have. It's just those two teachers are retiring and it's kind of important for that.
And there will be plans to make sure that we get people trained. I'll let Tom kind of speak to...
Yeah, you know, there's a firm commitment that all of our IB classes will be taught by IB certified teachers next year. And if that means summer training or what that means, we're going to take care of what we need to take care of so that our IB classes are taught by IB certified teachers.
Is there a possibility that some of the teachers who are not right now IB certified will get certified, now the experienced certified teacher will teaching the kids?
I'm not sure I understood your question correctly, but I'll give it
We started the IB program for our kids when they started 2 years back. We have told the entire IB team of the teachers who are certified will move as is to Farmington when the time comes.
But now you're saying that is not going to happen or possibly.
No, that's not what I said at all. What I said is that that those classes will be taught by certified IB teachers. I would say in most cases, those are teachers who are currently teaching IB in Harrison. There may be an example, I think either Mr. Green or Mr. O'Brien talked about a situation of a retirement or a teacher who requested to leave the program to go and do something else. And in those situations, we would make sure that we did the appropriate training to have somebody in that place.
We actually have several IB questions. Should I read a few?
Yeah, let's.
Okay. So I'm going to try to read a few at a time if it gets too much. Has the district thought about using their resources to help them with the IB transition? As a parent, I would like to have someone overseeing the transition of this program, since everyone will be new in their position, the IB coordinator and the CAS testing, etc. Has the district thought about having Dr. Baruch help us through this transition?
Did you write that question?
I did not.
Seriously.
Why not have her work as an IB coach, half transitional coach, and I think it's half MIP. Is that correct?
MIP would be the program.
To support new staff, give students and support to families. Since the beginning of the IB program, the district has found success by making sure the IB students were supported through their unique program. There was an IB coordinator, a CAS testing coordinator, an IB counselor, an extended essay supervisor, and well-trained IB teachers. Since the departure of both Lisa Dean, the IB coordinator, and Dr. Anderson, who was filling in while she was gone, CAS and IB testing coordinator Vicki Palmer has really taken charge and has been doing the job of two people. Vicki is retiring this year. The current half-time IB counselor is going to another school. There is no IB coordinator, and we are moving the IB program to a new school. What is the district's plan to fill all of these open positions? Now stop there and go.
How did the microphone end up here?
Oh, yeah.
So we do have plans to fill all those roles. Polly is going to stay at East to get the middle years program off the ground. There are plans to have a system-wide IB/AP coordinator to help coordinate the IB program. We'll replace the testing coordinator for IB. There's an additional counseling position being added at Farmington High School to help support the IB program. So we feel like things are a little bit ambiguous now, but we have plans in place to replace all those roles.
Is the counselor going to be trained? Because the current counselors are not, and they're giving very bad advice, in fact, incorrect advice. So it's creating a lot of havoc.
As well as sooner than later will these people be announced, because they need this information now, not announced in September. We need to know now.
All three of our counselors at Farmington High School have already been trained. We will have one additional counselor, actually two additional counselors that we will need to pursue training for in the early summer. But that training has already taken place.
But who do they talk to now then? I mean, that's what, if my son's got bad information, my son has an appointment coming up with the current counselor he's assigned.
My daughter's getting completely wrong information.
Are they Harrison? Are they current Harrison students?
Yes.
Okay.
This information
At Farmington or Harrison?
About classes for next year. I mean,
They're
I
set
had to
up
go
for next year.
call teachers, call parents, find out, because they were getting completely wrong.
Can you see me after this? Can we talk individually?
But what about a coordinator? There has to be an IB coordinator.
We agree. Yeah, we're in the process
Will
of
it be
getting
in
that.
place before September?
Yes.
Like before the end
It'll
of the
be in
year,
place
with
before the
these
end of June.
known for
Okay.
the teachers as well.
You said before the end of June?
Yeah, before the end of June.
I don't think my question's been read yet, but just listening to this, like, I've had a student who's gone through the diploma program. I have a current junior doing the diploma program. I have another student, junior, who's doing the certificate program. And I have a lot of students in 8th grade who are going to this program. So I wear a lot of different hats, and I can only speak for myself, and maybe if anyone else is here who's been through the program. The program has such unique challenges, and you really, I've had other parents who have said to me, well, your child has made that choice to go into that program, that's right. But they're still kids, they're still teenagers, and you really don't get into the rigor of that program until your junior year. And and then the junior and senior year, excuse us, all hell breaks loose. And the parents, you know, are trying to guide their kids. And if it wasn't for, honestly, the people that were in that position who kind of went through, you know, how we gave them those, it's all new, you just said all those positions are going to be new. And some of them, you said it's going to be an AP and an IEP coordinator, they're completely different. You can't even compare the two because I had kids go through both. And someone just put a question that you read, why isn't the district using the resources that we currently have? You know, and I guess I'm looking at Poly going, there's all these people that are getting new positions. Someone needs to guide them. You know, and like the Harrison counselor, some of them were trained, but because they were new in that position, which would be like it will be at Farmington, I don't think they guided their kids incorrectly on purpose. It's because they didn't know and they had no one else to go to. You know, like right now my daughter doesn't even go to her counselor, she just goes to Palmer. You know, and Vicki Palmer has done more, she's doing like 3 people's jobs. I hope she's getting paid 3 times. But I just want, you know what I mean? I hear everything you're just saying, Dr. Heisch. I hear you, but unless you've been walked through the program, you really don't know, because I didn't know. And these kids, I think my question's in there, IB kids fail. They will fail. When they get in there, their chance of failing are high unless there's somebody kind of overseeing.
I agree. They need a shepherd. They need a shepherd, and they need somebody now to pick up on the experience of the people leaving and moving on and getting to know the bones of it. I've got an alum here in IB program, and she knows you're not going to have successful students if you don't have somebody there now to shepherd these kids and move them on forward.
And I don't understand why the 10th graders going into programs don't even know who the coordinator is. They have not met with this person. Basically they're getting all the information from teachers or parents, and there's so much misinformation out there that I don't even know where to. Luckily I have friends who've been through it, but these students for this program, if you want to be successful, this diploma program, you need somebody in there helping these kids.
Especially the diploma kids.
Is it possible to gather them? Are you
It's
going to
all
try
right.
to
Gather
gather
the
them?
teachers that are currently IB teachers into those positions? Or are you going to try to seek from outside?
No, we'll seek internally.
If you are going to seek internally, and you're going to try to try to give those positions to teachers that have already been teaching. So I will tell you, I'm both a parent and a former teacher, and I taught AP and IB Spanish as a split class for 3 years, which is one of the reasons why I retired. I would not recommend that coordinator be the same person. It's honestly, it is one of the most stressful positions possible. And I mean, if you want to call Novi High School, I taught at Novi High School, call them to talk to them about how they did it. It's because the testing window is pretty similar. You know, they crisscross. That person like doesn't sleep for like a month. You know, I mean, it's just, and there's so much stress that the students have. And you're doing that too, right? You're being a social worker and making sure that the health of the students. And I had students that were hospitalized before and after the exam, and just because the stress level was so high. So, and the staff as well, right? So, I mean, I really, if you have a way to rethink that and make it a part-time teaching and a part-time coordinator position for each of those two, I would suggest doing that. That seems to work well.
I'm sure Mr. Shelton would like to get his own IB coordinator on board, right? Yep.
And it's very different.
The philosophy is so different.
The kids who are doing the diploma program versus the certificate program, they both have very different needs. But those kids who are doing the diploma program, they don't know what they don't know. That seems to be my motto lately. You know, and when they get in there, if there's somebody who hasn't walked the walk already and done it, they're going to be guided differently. You know, when they get to that junior year, their senior, they have to know the answer. You know, the kids will do the work, but they still need to be, what you said, shepherd.
Yeah, it's a great
shepherd. And it's very different than EP and honors. It's rigorous. It's
Well,
so different.
a perfect example is for this year's juniors, when we had met, they realized that if you just let the kids go on, it wasn't that there were dates, but if they hadn't plugged along, then all of a sudden everything was due. So this year with the junior class, Vicki's worked with, there's deadlines and there's due dates, and they can kind of miss them, but it's the time where they check them. Well, new people coming in won't realize
wasn't the place, so they're scared.
We actually have some more IB questions, but I think it would be fair to the audience if I switched over to some more general questions and then going back to IB, if that's okay. So I have a couple that will lump together that have to do with building capacity and so forth. So what are the latest number of students each FHS and NFHS are getting? What is the capacity at both? Will Farmington High consider using pod classrooms? Concern from students that they will be overcrowding. What will the class sizes be? Will there be a minimum to run an IB class? Will there be a cap at Farmington that would then cause some students to be shifted to North? And the greatest concern is space. Why is every teacher at Farmington going to float? What is an alternative? This will affect every staff member and every student negatively. What specifically will you do to improve teacher-student relationships? So much teaching and learning taking place during passing time. This sort of has to do with that, so I'll just put it in there. If teachers are shared classrooms, how will students find them if they need extra help?
Okay, there was a lot there.
Go slow one more time.
Okay, so starting with numbers, I don't remember North's numbers. Excuse me. Farmington next year, we are looking right now currently in the neighborhood of 1560. I believe it's 1562 is the most recent estimate that I've seen. That is a significant jump from where we're at right now. Right now we have been hovering around 1,200 for the last 2 years. So we have, so what we're looking at in Farmington is shared classroom spaces. We're working with teachers on some of that right now. We're developing systems where teachers share classroom spaces. We have teacher workrooms, different ones established through the building, where teachers can work during their planning hour, collaborate with other teachers, etc. We're also looking at things that we can do within the building to improve traffic flow and circulation. If you've been at Farmington High School, you know there's one spot in particular that gets really jammed up. That's the 400-500 crossover that just becomes a jumbled mess during class time. And we're looking at some things like one-way hallways, maybe increased passing time with staggered releases, other things that we can do to accommodate the increased number of students. We've done the math on the course request that we have right now. And we do know that we can fit every section that we have scheduled with students in the building. So we will continue to work through the schedules with that. We will continue to work with teachers in how to adjust to our new normal, so to speak. There are a lot of the logistics that we still need to determine, and some of them we're not going to be able to determine until we're in the space, right? Until we have students in the building and we know, okay, this is an issue that students don't know where to find their teachers because they float between classrooms. And so there are still some of those details we need to figure out. But we are still within our building capacity, even with the large numbers that we have right now. Is there anything else? Class sizes. So. There were a couple things related to class sizes in the question. Our class sizes will not change next year. We are not looking at, right now we average around 29 a section. 29, we try to make that our upper limit. Occasionally we have to go a little bit over to accommodate a specific student or a specific situation or make a schedule complete. But we're not looking at increasing beyond that. We have already accounted in the staffing process for the need to run some smaller IB classes. And that does not impact the other class sizes of the building.
What's the smallest that you'll run a class?
I'm sorry?
What's the smallest that you'll run a class?
Well, we have this rule that we break frequently. We'd like to have classes of 20 as our minimum. There are 20. There are times that we run IB sections that don't have 20 students in them. Right? So we've had sections that are low.
Do you have
Yeah.
a bottom though? I taught split classes because nobody
We have opportunities where we have split classes and combine.
don't recommend it, by the way.
Right, we'll combine 3 art classes of jewelry together that will total up to 18 to 24 kids between 3 sections. but we'll run an IB language in some cases at six or eight kids.
So I'm not sure if I captured all the answers to those questions, but I might give Mr. Green a chance to respond from North Farmington.
So we're going to be somewhere right around 1350 or a little more. Probably closer to 1370, I think, last time we looked. When I got here 8 years ago, we had 1380. It was, the halls were thick with people, but it worked, and it worked well. We are going to share rooms. I think what we've really based around is we're going to try to build rooms around subjects rather than teachers, so that we'll have an English 9 room, an English 10 room. That way the materials are present, and teachers don't have to lug everything on a cart and bring everything there. They'll have a landing space and some stuff to share there. And so you might have 2 different rooms that you're in, but your kids would learn your schedule and know where you are at certain hours that they needed to find you. They'll know where the workspaces are so they can find teachers. Remember that we have IST, instructional support time, every Wednesday, and so they'll know where those teachers are so they can get help at that point. So there's some built-in pieces there that'll help. And I think this is going to help us, too, make our buildings more geographically friendly, because we're going to be able to group all of our subject classrooms together. Right now, we have, like, if any Game of Thrones fans are out there, there's some, like, way, way, way up in the North English classes that are out with the wildlings, and then everybody else is down in the South in a different place in the building. So this is going to help us make sure that kids know exactly where the English hall is, know where the science area is, and it'll make their navigation of the building smoother. And I think with class sizes, the one place you'll see us deviate internally is often our lower level classes for freshmen where we're starting out, where creating that foundation is critical. We might run those lower and run an honors class higher, just to make sure that we build that firm foundation, because if you jeopardize that for freshmen, like algebra, I'm thinking algebra, biology, English 9, if that platform isn't, if that foundation isn't firm, those kids are going to struggle year after year. So that's one place where you might see us bring a class down to 26, 27, and push something else up to 30 or 31, just to kind of match that out and make sure we get the foundation built. But aside from that, we stick to the 29, and we really try to make these decisions based on what's best for students, and then what's functional for adults next, if that makes any sense.
Are there any significant facility changes planned for over the summer in both high schools?
Farmington's construction is pretty much done with a few little details here and there. North, we are finishing our last run. We have an older locker room and old training room that are going to get turned into a new lab space, so that's maybe the one big, it's not a footprint increase, it's just a repurposing of some areas. Locker rooms are going to get refreshed, but it's normal stuff that was kind of on the docket for us. And they'll finish our construction. So we have maybe one new room coming online, and then everything else is mostly refresh, if I'm remembering right. Maybe a couple new offices are going to get built because we have like the ASD program coming over from Harrison, and that brings with it some support staff, so we wanted to make sure we provided offices for them. So there's some pieces within internal areas we're already building, but not major change. But the nice thing is we'll be wrapping up construction about the same time that we're moving new folks in, which will make life easier.
And at Farmington, our biggest things that we have is, first of all, we are getting the special education SXI program from Harrison. So we have 2 empty classrooms that we're converting into special education rooms. And we are also working really hard to convert our teacher workspace to make that pleasant, welcoming environment for teachers. Unfortunately, that wasn't accounted for in our construction experience 2 summers ago. And even though we got some nice paint on the walls and some carpet on the floors, they basically took the furniture from the 1980s and put it right back in there. So, so we're looking forward to a refreshed look and a comfortable environment for our teacher in those teacher workspaces. That's our biggest thing.
Will there be a cap at Farmington High if we have new enrollment, so that all new enrollment would head over to North Farmington, since there is such a big disparity in?
Currently, no. Currently, we've not had any discussion of that. We have had some discussion about what we call administrative transfers between buildings, and those are the transfers. Say a student is scheduled to attend North, but decides, oh, my friends are at Farmington, I want to go there. We are going to be very selective on those, just to try to control that overall number.
But shouldn't there be a conversation about a cap, though? I mean, it's not physically safe
you've never been at capacity. This community has been spoiled. I'm a teacher who, when I arrived here in '05, did the research for the capacities. I've watched every year. The problem will be in the community here in Farmington, and it behooves you to actually inform the community of this. We've never run our high schools at capacity, so we're spoiled. It's like if we brought 5 more kids into my house. My kids each have a van, but the weekend that they have to share a van, they're all put under and they're crowded. I'm like, no, so none of the buildings, my understanding, even watching the numbers now, we're not even going to be running at capacity for what they were built at and what the thing is, even next year with that.
But the difference is capacity is unrealistic. This capacity is every seat is filled with a butt every hour.
But I'm
every
talking
day.
in
That's not
training
realistic.
range. What's the capacity of your 2 buildings?
So I've been told capacity of our building is 1,600.
Okay.
1,600.
So we're at 1562, and again, that's every seat filled every hour of the day. And if you have 5 sections of IB classes running with 7 to 15 kids, those are smaller classes. If you've got your special ed rooms with, 5 to 15 kids, those are smaller classrooms. The math doesn't work.
It really does. It really does. The math has been done. A lot of it is capturing some spaces that we currently have that we're not using as classroom spaces, where we can run a class of 10 students, but we can't run a class of 30, so we're not using those spaces right now.
Capacity is at 1,600. Are you going to cap it at 1,600 and not allow any other new enrollment? If that's the real capacity, even though I think it's not realistic.
Yeah, we have not decided to cap it yet.
Shouldn't it be? I mean, isn't that even like a fire hazard?
We're monitoring the administrative transfer requests between North Farmington and Farmington High right now. We're not seeing a trend of students that want to leave North to go to Farmington. It's increase it.
I'm talking about the new enrollment. Every year we've had new enrollment, correct? Am I wrong in that? The last few years we've had increased enrollment.
So typically, what I've seen, so I have 2 years of trends that I can personally see, and then obviously previous to that, things that I've heard of. Typically, from this point, our drops equal our adds. Now, the last couple of years, it's been a little bit skewed because we've been taking administrative transfers from Harrison, families that have decided to come over. I understand. I'm answering from my perspective, and I see Mr. Green adding for North as well. From this point until school starts in the fall, our drops are the same as our adds. We don't significantly differ. The only exception to that being when we had students from Harrison coming early.
IB has taken a little dip with the transition. So I know next year's senior classes are going to be a little bit lower than they would normally be. I would anticipate, although it's not going to help the cap problem, because I anticipate once things settle down, that those classes will be running at much larger numbers, because I'm very confident that if we get IB implemented properly at Farmington, the program is only going to grow. So they may have a problem up the road that it could be over 1,600, because if you want to do IB, you can go. That's how it has been. But I know that right now it's just took a little bit of a hit this year next. But right now, because I've been helping with the new students coming in. Right now we've got over 100 ninth graders coming in for IB.
They're already counted, Tom's number.
Correct, except I would anticipate if it follows suit that we'll probably have about 20 more that would add coming from either private or homeschooled settings.
Okay, so there you go, right there. I mean, these are real challenges, and it bothers me that it's never been discussed. That's a problem. I mean, you guys had 4 years to talk about this. It's never been discussed that you might put a cap on it. That just is remarkable to me. Especially, I would hope, if you're planning on building up your middle school program, the goal is to have more IB kids. That would be great. Right? I mean, that's a good thing, but then you're going to have to shift other kids over to North who were intended to go to Farmington. Am I wrong? I mean, you've got, if next year you've got 200 or 300, if you're starting the NYP program, one would hope that you'll have bigger numbers. So how are you going to address that a year from now? We're going to be in the exact same position or worse.
Then in a year from now, we'll create a programming at North that attracts students that are high school age with emphasis with the want to go to North. And if we don't have enough administrative transfers, we find a way to move kids.
And what about portables? Do you guys have that in your budget? If you get your numbers, your real numbers, and the real, you know, puzzle pieces that are you going to be able to put portables on in the parking lot? What are you going to do? I have very little faith in this. I really do. It's very stressful. I'm like, this is close for me to get my 10th grade. I don't believe you. I don't believe you.
Have you been in Farmington High yet?
Yes, I'm a senior and a sophomore. Yes. I have. Yes. I'm Dr. Thompson Shaw.
We have a question in the back also. Is it about the building capacity and?
Yeah, so I kind of like numbers sometimes. So I still have on my phone from when the building site utilization committee happened, and it appears Farmington's capacity has dropped by like 253 kids since it was voted for Harrison to close. Numbers we got were higher. So based on your numbers, Farmington's at 98% capacity, building utilization. North Farmington is at 67%, assuming that they still have a capacity of 2,052, which is what we were given in the bond numbers. So those were.
What number were you given in the bond for Farmington?
I'm sorry, the building site utilization was told that North Farmington's capacity was 2,052 students.
Right. And Farmington was higher.
It's 1,863.
Yes, it is 18, that's what we were told. That was why I was shocked.
So I'm a little concerned that you're telling me one school is at 98% and one school is at 67%. That's a little, and like if you're moving kids over, if you're moving certain programs and they can go to either school and you're creating space at Farmington, would those be better suited at North?
So let's talk a little bit about what the school capacity is. My name is John Muir. I'm the Executive Director of School Services. And the number that Tom said of 1,600, I know where that number comes from. The numbers that you're looking at are about, if I'm not mistaken, they're about fire code. There is, when the state of Michigan says that a school can be at a certain capacity, they base it on square foot measurement. They do not base it on something that we would use like number of classrooms.
This is based on number of classrooms multiplied by students.
So, but I just want to talk a little bit about the background of capacity. The 1,600 that Tom was talking about was something that we calculated when we sat down and said, if we had to pack, put sections in here, how many students do we think we could comfortably serve at a 25-to-1 classroom ratio? So we only had 25 students in the classrooms with that 1,600 number, I'm pretty sure, which is a little bit lower than we typically run. So we were looking at kind of a conservative estimate. So when he says 1,600, that's where that came from, to answer one question. The other thing that you brought up that I think is an important point is there are some programs, and you talked about it a little bit, that demand more square footage per student because of the nature of the program. An obvious example might be an ASD classroom, where you might have 6 students in the classroom, but yet they occupy a full classroom. So we're taking those things into calculation when we come up with a number like 1,600. Without looking at the numbers, Julie, that you had on your phone, I can't address that. But I wanted to give a little background on where that came from and how we were looking at this.
So what is North Farmington's capacity? Has that changed or is that still?
It has not changed. Actually, it's probably gone, well, it hasn't changed because we haven't added square footage to the building.
Right.
So there you go for that one. But its operational capacity has actually increased because we've added classroom by repurposing. I think we've added 5 or 6 classrooms.
Yeah, by the time we're done, we will have 6 new instructional spaces that we carved out of media center locker rooms that were not being really utilized to their fullest, training rooms, just repurposing spaces.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have.
So you'll have one school at about 98%, one school at about 62, 63.
Is that? It would feel a lot better to all of us if we were split right down the middle, like 14, 25, 14.
So again, my point is not our current students. Our current students have already decided where they're going. I'm not talking about that. I am talking about if there are transfers.
There's also a dip in enrollment, right? Our enrollment numbers decline in the next few years after this down from here, so the numbers will correct. The other thing we need to remember is we set a boundary line for the district that also included IB kids coming over, but the boundary line captured more kids going to Farmington. We have a new superintendent and a relatively new board going into next year, and that really is probably their piece to look at and say, once the numbers start to shake out, this year's going to be high.
Because
it
it was choice.
Year. Once they start to shake out, do we need to look at that boundary? Because to say that we haven't talked about this isn't really fair. We in the transition committee have talked about it, but our purview isn't to write the checks that make those decisions. We've started to raise the question around the numbers, and it started to lead to, yeah, we're gonna have a dip in enrollment after this, so then that should kind of balance things out and steady out, and we wanna pay attention to that, but we've been begging the question of what do we need to look at? And right now, to knee-jerk and start changing things before we live into next year, which is supposed to be the aberration, the highest aberration, didn't make a lot of sense.
Still seems like you don't have any kind of contingency plan, the what if. And again, putting a hard cap on it, that's your what if. You go, at this point, we cannot take any more kids, sorry, we're full. You know, that's an easy thing. Or the contingency is, if we have to take more kids, we're gonna start buying portables, and you guys need to have a budget for that. I'm afraid that the hallways are not gonna be safe, and you've already talked, you know, you mentioned that you haven't even decided whether or not the passing times are gonna change. I'm gonna tell you right now, I went through this transition twice in Novi. You have to increase passing times, you have to. When I started at Novi High School, there were 1,200 kids, they're looking at 2,400 now. I mean, it was just, it was a ridiculous amount of growth in a very short period of time. And you have to make those adjustments.
And we will if we determine that we need to.
But then that changes your minutes for your year too, right? And you've got both high schools, you're trying to make them equal, and it's just not.
Can I just say that as a parent who's been in the district the whole time, I deeply appreciate, literally I deeply appreciate with all the scrambling and all the stuff and all the things going on, you know, that I've held steady from preschool in this district, the degree in which you honored your word. You honored your word, and a lot of this is because you honored your word with the Harrison parents, and as horrible as it is with that we're closing, you kept your word to keep us running 4 grades, for this, for that. We dropped, it cost them your budget. You also kept your word that every kid, and I had one say, every kid got to choose, every family got to choose. You didn't dictate, you didn't let the boundaries. That has given you a huge amount of street cred as far as freedom, because we are literally choosing, and that matters. And the fact that we're cattywampus is because a lot of it, and I know because I have a ton of kids around me, you've let us choose, and the boundaries would not have dictated. All of mine would have gone to North, and we're going to Farmington. So I get that there's a thing, and I'm not saying your point is not valid, but I've never known the district not to, you know, at least look to the next year and the next year. It's just, but I appreciate that this is a impeccably, like, letting the families choose and getting it out. And I know it's not easy, so everyone.
And that's not what I was talking
No,
about.
but that's what's causing the current thing right now.
Was new enrollments.
I got it, but that's what's causing the cattywampus right now.
So I heard a couple mentions of boundaries, so if I could hop into a couple boundary questions, maybe while we're still talking about that. Somebody wanted to know about busing and when the boundaries will be released. And will there be shuttle busing for IB and 0 hour? Wood Creek is IB, and so will some non-FHS bound East students.
She pointed at me again. Was the first question, are the boundaries released and will there be busing?
Yes.
Yeah, the boundaries are on our website, and there will be busing within those boundaries to North and to Farmington. The second part of the question was, will we have that first period shuttle that I think we traditionally have? So
IB and 0 hour.
yeah, I don't know if we're, yeah, we will probably be running a little bit of 0 hour at Farmington High to accommodate a class for the IB that comes before the day, but we should be running that shuttle bus because we will still have some opportunities where we need students maybe to travel between the schools, because for many years if you've had kids, there might be a class that we're not able to offer at both schools, so we will still have some of that going on back and forth. Julie, I saw your hand go up.
I saw the boundary maps, but my question is more specifically for busing. There are some Harrison kids who live fairly close to Farmington, and busing boundaries aren't.
Oh, yeah, and I don't, you're right.
Is that for planning?
It's a 1.5 mile circle around the school. So, you know, I got
shuttle buses for kids who are doing 0 hours to pick them up and take them to that early class, as well as if you were a North Farmington student, if you go to Wood Creek and you want to go to Farmington for IB, because that's kind of been your track, do you get a shuttle bus?
We have been successful in getting students there in the morning. The problem is getting them back in the afternoon. That's more problematic.
Wait, you're saying
No, you haven't.
people are bused to Harrison for IB? Other?
No, that's not what I said.
Okay.
No, that's not what I said. But students do shuttle all over the district, between our middle schools for first hour classes, between our high schools for first hour classes, and what I
So
said
you're
was.
referring to IB.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm talking specifically for IB like CMS. You could show up at Lanigan and it would, or if, in the case of North, you show up.
We'll
at Denver and it
certainly,
takes you.
we'll certainly consider all these options. We got to make sure that we see how the schedule lines up and what the true need is. That's the first answer, is that we'll get that now.
I've been in for
So.
6 years, it's never come to fruition, just so you know. We carpool, we vet, and then I jump.
The next question is, my student is going to be a senior and is going to be assigned yet another counselor. Counselors write college letters. How will you handle this when the counselor will barely be a senior?
I was thinking that same thing. We have to ask for all the letters this year.
So I'm going to let Mr. Green respond a little bit too, but that certainly is tough. I can tell you from my personal experience as a former guidance counselor, I walked into that situation. I walked into a high school where I had a caseload of students, including a group of very ambitious seniors that were looking for that college admissions. And I can tell you that it's very doable. I think that it takes investment of time to get to know the students, to better understand their needs and where they would like to go. And I think counselors are well trained to build those relationships quickly and get to know the students that they need to get to know. So.
Can I recommend that you have your student write the letter for them and just send it to the counselor and ask them to sign it?
Our counselors also, you know, our counselors do a nice job with career. Our counselors do a nice job with career cruising and reading students' background. And career cruising, if you don't know, is the career. Career program that they use throughout their time in school, where they're constantly updating with their activities and things they've been involved in. So that's one resource counselors have. And again, I think it's very doable, and it's done a lot in other cases.
Go back to the other counselor though. Is there anything, I don't know, but like with Jamie Gibbons, if she's MIA from wherever my kid is, can't we just find her? And
Absolutely.
Say, like that doesn't preclude you from locating.
Absolutely.
We are also going to have additional counselors. This is going to be broader because we're going to have additional counselors to each building, right? So there's going to be some shuffle of kids anyways. But the nice thing is their caseloads are going to be smaller because you'll have 5 total. We'll have 4 total. So even though your numbers are big, the counselors' caseloads are going to be smaller. That's going to create some workspace for them to develop relationships. They've already been talking about how do we handle new seniors and building relationships and trying to lean into that. There is nothing prohibiting your child from reaching out to a counselor or a former teacher or a former administrator, even though they're not at that building with them. By all means, I have had students who left North who wrote back to me and asked for a letter. And yes, I mean, especially if I knew the kid well enough, absolutely. We are really trying to take care of everybody in this, so people are going to figure things out. You're worrying very much about the people you're supposed to worry about, your most prized possessions. Absolutely. We do not, for a moment, undervalue that. And I know our counselors don't. In fact, if there's anybody who probably has that to a fault, it would be our counselors who really, really care. And so they are going to go to some pretty extreme lengths to be able to do that. We had a new half-time counselor at North this year who really went to some extreme lengths for her seniors. To get to know them, to really create time and space to be able to do that. And I think you'll see that across the counselors. But it's important, and we've got to attend to it. So please keep that in our minds. If you think we're falling short of that, let us know so that we can make sure that we meet that standard.
Also, I know this year, well, first with college applications and the common application, the counselor has to submit those online. But what I did on numerous occasions this year with students that I had as a counselor kind of a counselor last year at Harrison, is that I would write the letter, I would put in the letter that I was in this capacity before and offered to write that letter, and then I sent it to the counselor, and the counselor would upload it into the Common App. So I think that you would probably find that. I know that Jamie and Jen Kowalski are still staying in the district, and I would be surprised if they wouldn't be willing to do the same thing.
They love the kids.
Yeah, we get very close with our students. So
the next couple of questions have to do with AP and IB, so I'm going to put those together.
We have done a nice job of sharing AP courses. When one can't run at North and it's run at Farmington, we move kids over there, or vice versa. We do that often. When we schedule, we know that there's some courses that as kids move along in IB, they may want to get an AP course that's attached to it, and we always make sure that we coordinate in the planning. You know, we're going to continue with the AP program at North. Ours is pretty strong. I think Farmington's numbers are strong as well, and so I think you'll see an adjustment period, I think, as both programs learn to coexist. But we've learned a lot, I think, as a district through running it through Harrison on how to try to keep those programs coexisting. And then if there is a need, the nice thing is if you have a boutique need that a kid from the IB program wants, we'll find a way. If Farmington can't offer it, we'll find a way to make it work with North. We'll figure something out. Even if we have to do some funky travel thing, we've sorted it out in the past.
Just to reiterate, I do agree that there is capacity for both the strong IB and the strong AP program at Farmington High School. We're proud of our AP courses and the courses that we offer. There may be some ebbs and flows and some adjustments as IB comes in and students go one way versus the other, but we do believe very strongly that we will maintain both strong programs at Farmington High School.
Thank you. I'm pretty sure that all of this we're going to reach you was addressed, but I'm going to read it just in case it wasn't. The IB program, especially the students pursuing the IB diploma, requires support and guidance that is different from an AP student or an honor student. The amount of time and work required with the CAS project, extended essay, theory of knowledge, service hours, as well as the internal and external exams is more rigorous than any other program. It is all new to these students, and although these students have chosen to take on these challenges, they are still students and definitely need guidance and support from someone who understands the unique challenges of this program. It is very easy for an IB student to fail. How will the district make sure this doesn't happen? Did we already cover all that? Okay. So with that, then. Oh. There was, I'm sorry, what, was there?
Somebody else.
So I think it will help if we accelerate our timing of naming the IB coordinator, identifying who the replacement would be for Vicky, right? Identifying who the counseling is. I think the expectation at Farmington High, though, is that all counselors will be IB trained, and we'll have. Okay. Take advantage of it.
So has it been posted, the IB?
No, because until tonight we thought it was going to be an IB AP coordinator position. You're causing us to rethink that.
Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Yeah.
Clearly you got IB stuff to handle, but I would like to personally, and I will say this to the board, at Harrison, I'm not crying because it's all sad, but it's not the same at the other two high schools. It's not the same. I've been on either side as a teacher in my career of closing down the building and then going to another, and then I've been on the receiving end of receiving. It's not the same, and I just want to say, I don't know how many of you are Harrison parents, But, you know, we have a teacher who's in a coma for a year and a half now. We have one who was diagnosed with lung cancer a couple weeks ago who's gone. We are 0 for 4 with administrators for whatever reasons. I actually have no judgment. I love every one of those administrators for the record. I don't care what the story and the gossip and all that is. It was a rock star from Polly being moved out, and Angela's fantastic, and Jim, and Lisa, but we're 0 for 4 in that building. Chris is in there on every given day. He gets hit with more questions, and he's gracious, and I'll get back to you, and he does that. But it's not the same for the staff at Harrison, and they are under duress. It is a closing thing, and I know it's not the same, and I request that you actually pay attention to them in the next 4 or 5 or 6 weeks, because they are 0 for 4. They're 0 for 4. I've never seen anything like this. And here's the thing, and you're leaving, Holly's gone, Elizabeth, they're all gone. It's 0 for 4. And your what's called, Chris is in there, and he'll tell you that your rock stars are rocking. Some of them are at 36, and some of them are at 8 kids because you kept your word, and I'm not complaining on the 36, and I have a kid in 33 kids in a class, I have one with 8. Those teachers, whether are good, bad, or indifferent, they are holding glue. They look for the minister, not there. They look for Polly, she's not there. They look. He's coming in, rocking it just because, but it's not the same. And I request that you pay a little bit closer attention in this closing down of the Harrison. Because here's the truth, my kids are in water wars. They don't really give a rat's ass. Like, it's all sad, but they're going to move on to become, you know, whatever. That's the truth. Kids are pretty resilient. But I've talked to a lot of teachers. Your counselors are, they're working triple time. Even your front staff isn't the same. We don't even have the front staff because you took, what's her name, Christian over last year. So that's not even the same. So you're closing the thing. I know you're very out. Walk into that building, take them something, go in and talk to their staff because they are literally holding the glue in that building because it's just one hit after the other, and it's emotional hits. They love Angela, they love Jim, they love Lisa, they love Lashbrook, they love all these people, and there's stuff going on, and they're still rocking it with the kids. So on behalf of the Harrison staff, I ask that you at least, you know, I know that Chris is doing the right thing, but get in there in the next few weeks, or I don't know, send them something, go in and take care of them.
Everyone's losing their jobs. I mean,
And some are, but it's a lot.
You're 100% right. 100%.
It's a lot for a closing year on top of it.
Yep, and when you step back and look at everything, so in the 8 years I've been at North, 65% of my staff is new. No other school in the district has been decimated like we were in reductions.
Yep.
So we have our own special brand of trauma that we've been through and bounced back. The only benefit coming out of that, we got a wave of veteran Harrison and veteran Farmington teachers over. And the first year, we didn't get it that right. We were close, but we fell short of where I'd like us to be. And that's fresh in our minds. And we have some folks that have come over in the last few years that are kind of keeping that drumbeat in our ear to do it right. I know at Farmington, Tom, he's a key part of the transition team. We have been talking about it. As things have happened at Harrison, we've both sent over breakfast to the building a couple times.
Yeah, that's
Little
all I'm
things
talking.
like
I trust next year you guys will absorb them and be great, because it's a community that's great and gracious and generous. I'm not worried about that. It's just a tough slog this year to close a building and be hit and hit and hit and hit. It's just like, gosh.
There's only one thing left to happen. That a sinkhole opens up.
No. Well,
right, like
it feels like that too. I've talked with
I shouldn't say the word. I'm glad that got a few chuckles, but I mean, look, you couldn't write the story that's happening.
You couldn't have. And they're feeling it is my only point. They're feeling it, so.
It is in the forefront of our mind. We committed to getting, and to your point as well about the jobs, we committed to making sure that on May 15th, everybody would know where they are. On the afternoons of May 13th and 14th, we're meeting personally with anybody, the principals are meeting personally with anybody who's been involuntarily reduced or lost a position. And we're going to do it in a way that they can save faces, save dignity, and respond. And then on May 15th, we are meeting with everybody that has a position personally. We're dividing it up amongst our assistant principals and principals to talk to them about where they are and where they're going to be that next year. And then the last week of school, we have some half days for people to be able to pack up, get ready, and come over and take a look at buildings. And we're talking about, at that point, a month on, having people to come over and break bread with the new people they're going to be with. Nothing super structured,
come over, just meet people, do some blending, and we're really trying to work on some plans and attend to the human beings, because they're the ones that are gonna be taking care of your most precious possession.
Yeah, you're gonna have some PTSD from a little bit, just I don't mean to dramatize it, but just a little bit.
No, I
And it would behoove the board and you to infuse in the next 6 weeks something, because it's just been a slog. And I personally talked with them, so.
And along with that, and I know I brought it up before when you talked about the staffing, but Mr. Dale retiring physics IB and Mrs. Clifford, math IB. You'll have IB people chosen as well, and my son's doing his paper with the physics professor, so now he's gone. So if he doesn't have access to that person to do pre-work during the summer and have that teacher to bounce things off of, this is where we're talking with these decisions need to be made so that we know who we're working with next year. There's work that my kid's doing over summer. And I know everyone wants their vacation. I get all that, but
we are in the process of dialing in what people's assignments are going to be, and some of those more sort of boutique, not to say that in a negative sense, but smaller 1 or 2 only section courses. Those we're going to know who those people are relatively quickly, and so we're going to start being able to put some things in motion before we even tell people what their full assignments are. So in some places where there are pressures like that, and I'm speaking for Tom, I feel bad I should shut up and give him the mic, but in all honesty, those are positions that I'm even privy at North to the conversations around because of the importance of getting them filled. And so those, we need to get those figured out now. They're in the process because we got to get people lined up for training. They're going to need time to prepare, and we know that students are in the lurch with that too, that they're going to need some context. So that does not escape us. It's just we're in a point now when jobs are in the wind, like we're trying to be as humane in this as we can and not overpromise and not leak in dribs and drabs. We want to just methodically move this through as humanely as possible. That will get out quickly and people will be prepared.
So. So on top of the sense of urgency, I'd also mention that, we all collectively have a belief that we treat students and we see students as individuals. And if your student has an individual need, like the need for somebody to help with a physics project over the summer, call me. Call your principal or email us.
Just call Holly. We know that's how it's going to go.
Call whoever you need to call. But I'm saying that we will support students as individuals and make sure their needs are met.
I mean, you and I have traded emails on
It's recently a Saturday, right?
But I appreciate that you kind of letting me know as well, and remember to just run it by you. Thank you.
Well, and I think again, it's going back to, it's that the uniqueness of that IB junior senior year. It's not something it's something the kids choose to do, and it's something that the teachers who take on the IB, SL and HL choose to do, but without that support and that guidance and someone overseeing it, it goes back to that question, the kid will fail, because there's a time element, and it's something like myself as a parent, I can't help a kid with that part of it. And I think that the question that I had in there, I reread, when IB first came here, it had a negative, it had a nuance vibe, nobody accepted it, nobody knew. And at Harrison, you guys did a great job of supporting it and building it. And now that it's going to another school, it's going to come back again. It is, that's just how it is. Smaller class sizes, boutique-like. I said it's anything but a boutique. Yeah. No, I know what you mean. But I mean, but that is, I talked to some teachers, and they're not always happy at Farmington that it's coming because they get special treatment, all that. And I could see that as a teacher, as a parent, I could see that. But until you walk that walk, they need someone to help transition them. Because honestly, the teachers will do everything they can if they're there. But I feel bad for those kids. I feel bad for the next year's seniors, but more so the juniors. The juniors and seniors.
So I get that, and I'm struggling a little bit with the best response I can give you. The best I can tell you and the best I can think of to reassure you is that we are 100% committed at Farmington to make a smooth transition and to make this transition successful for students and make this, and the first step, as Dr. Heitch was saying, is really making sure that we have those critical positions in place. And absolutely we will expedite that, and then after that is in place, then we'll make sure that we have a solid transition plan in place.
George, you need to cut her a bigger check, I'm sorry.
We all vote her for now. You do, and she does it because she likes us.
Which is why she's moving to the middle school.
I'm sorry.
I hope you really reconsider the IB/AP coordinator.
Yeah, we will.
Please. I think Mr. Shelton touched on this, in case there's something that you'd like to add. The question is, where is the special education program at Harrison going? And I believe you said
There's a couple of them. There's the SXI program currently at Harrison, and that program is coming to Farmington in some empty classroom space. I'm sorry, SXI is severely multiply impaired. And ASD is for autism spectrum disorder. The ASD program is moving from Harrison to North. Yeah, ASD, autism spectrum disorder. That's it, right? I'm sorry? And ESL is at North Farmington as well.
The newcomer program came to us, so that's our most recent to the country English language learners that are really at the beginning levels of the language. They came over this year with us, and that's been, from their return, a stellar success from what they tell us, not from our external perspective. I think it is, but they've been doing really well. We're also getting another cognitively impaired classroom at North. So we have the EL, we'll have 2 cognitively impaired rooms, we'll have the ASD program, we have dual diagnosis and emotionally impaired. So we've got the full pieces. That's another part that impacts building utilization, but we've got them well planned and we'll take good care of them. And we're really working to get those program staffs over to our buildings to talk and share about the programs so that people are aware and can make it part of our daily life. I think it's pretty cool for our kids to see human beings of all different walks.
Yeah, you'll be lucky because it's an amazing group of people that coming from Harrison. Nothing, I mean, they really are our ISD, all of them.
Yeah.
The next question is, currently the Farmington STEAM Academy shuttles students to Harrison High School. Where is this going?
Well, we talked about this a couple of months ago, George, in the cabinet, and we asked Aaron Hill, our transportation director, to give us a few options because we recognized that that had to happen, and so he was supposed to bring that back to us probably within the next couple of weeks. So.
Teachers' classrooms create the culture. Why does every teacher have to be on a cart? Isn't there a less disruptive or chaotic choice?
Okay, well, I'll start with that one. Certainly, we have stressed the value of relationships with teachers and students. We've stressed the value of teachers being available and consistent for students, and having a consistent, this is my classroom and you know where to find me and I'm in here all day, that absolutely creates that. You know, with our size limitations and our increased numbers, we have to find a different way to do that. We have to find a different way to create that culture, and that's going to take us some time. It's for a teacher who for years has been in one classroom and you know where to find that teacher, to all of a sudden be split between 2 classrooms and have to figure out where to keep all your stuff. I mean, it's a huge shift. And we know that we're just beginning that process of thinking out what does that entail and how do we do that. We'll keep working on it. I think a lot of it we're going to figure out along the way. But we're not going to let this shift allow us to change our focus on relationships and classroom community. Anything you want to add to that?
So we're in the process of year-end evaluations and sitting down and kind of reflecting on the year with our teachers. And one of the things, just dumb luck in our construction, our old main office, if any of you have been over to North, it's an internal section of the building. It was too expensive to extend the fire curtain in to bring it up to code to turn it into instructional space. So we needed to find some repurpose. So we turned it into a staff work area. And it's a pretty good sized area where they can go in and work. And we were excited about it, thinking they would use it once we were at capacity and people couldn't be in their rooms during their prep hours. Well, they started that this year. And I can count in at least half of the dozen or so year-end evaluation conversations I've had already, teachers have specifically cited that they got so much out of the lunch conversations or the conversations during their prep hour talking about students and talking about improving things, and that they didn't realize how isolated they were in their own rooms when they're running around trying to do stuff. There's a copier there, there's a bathroom around the corner, there's food. They land there and they are collaborating, and we've had some pretty cool things born out of that that impacted student success. So I think there's a flip side to it too that really pays off if we do it right. It creates more collaborative space. It creates more of a collegial atmosphere. You don't feel so isolated, and that's one thing where our teachers are feeling beleaguered and isolated, and this really has broken it down. And we are changing it. It's different. It used to be, yeah, when you, and you probably remember this from when you started, like, put the young one on a cart, put him on 2 floors and 5 classrooms, because I did it. And so I've broken that down everywhere I've been. And we're not going to have people on carts. We're going to set the rooms up to have what they need in them so that they're only bringing a small amount of stuff with them. They usually can land it in there. It's going to be a lot less that they have to schlep around. They're not going to be pushing carts through the halls. The digital side of things enables them to bring most of what they need there. It's going to be very different than what we were used to. And I think it's going to be pretty workable. And so far, I think the upside is paying off for what it's worth.
To have a student who has some academic challenges, he uses his passing time with every single solitary teacher to connect with them and to figure out, like, am I missing work? Am I not missing work? And as a former teacher of 21 years, I'll tell you, I use those 6 minutes, I use them every single solitary day, not to go to the bathroom, not to go to the copy machine, but to be with the student that needed me the most. And it's the time when you're walking in the room and you're seeing kids' demeanors and you're checking in on them and how was your weekend at relationship building. 90% of the relationship building happens during those 6 minutes. And you're taking that away from every student and every staff member. I get that some teachers are going to have to move. I get it. I mean, more than half my career, I shared a classroom. But to have every single solitary staff member, that means kids will not be building relationships with anybody.
It's not designed that every teacher is moving. There is a likelihood that a teacher will not have their own room, but their classes will typically be bunched. They'll be in one room for half the day and move to another room just down the hall, a couple doors. And so even moving between classrooms, they can talk with a child and walk, which actually will be better about getting the kid where they need to be on time and still accomplishing the conversation. They'll know they're just a couple doors down. There'll be some that are still in a room on their own. They'll have that. But there needs to be an ability to move. Rather than have one person bouncing between 4 or 5 rooms or 3 or 4 rooms, we're going to have a couple people move. I've got 3 English 9s in the morning and I've got 2 English 12s in the afternoon. And so they might just shift that way. And so I think what you bring up is valid. We need that contact time. But the beautiful thing about it, we're going to have some more teachers in the hallways instead of just inside their room, walking and talking and conversing. And it's going to be a habit change, but I think people will get used to it. I think it'll work with the relationships.
I don't know, but I worry about the Harrison teachers especially. It's obviously going to be hard for a Farmington teacher who's had the same classroom for 15 years to give it up. But for the Harrison teachers, they're going to come and they're never going to feel like they have a space of their own.
I don't know. They're pretty bright. They'll figure it out. They're amazing. Don't underestimate them.
They'll have a lock cabinet in every workspace. They'll have a lock
Will they have a physical workspace where they can leave stuff?
They will.
If you've ever seen a teacher's desk,
You see them every day.
right? Like turning in work, I mean, it's going to be.
There'll be stations in every room. Part of we have room sharing norms that we've even built in. That there'll be places where you can land your stuff and your partner can land their stuff. There's going to be locked cabinets for both people in the room, or locked files, like file drawers, so you can put your coat, your wallet, your purse, that stuff where it needs to be. A lot of those things have been built in.
I just worry that it's going to be a sterile environment, that the teachers aren't going to feel like they have a place to belong with the kids. I mean, there's like a...
The kids move, so the teachers will dance. I was 7 years in a row, I moved all over, but my other thing for you is, please tell me you're taking Carol and you're going to divide up the office staff, because those familiar places, Carol is like your golden gem from Harrison, so whatever building gets her, because she knows every kid, everything. So it's not just the teachers in your hallway. Have you divided up your security, and those are your glue. Your parking lot guy over at here, those people, they really know the kids. They've been watching them on video. Those are the ones I say, make sure you got an even. They're all bright.
And we're trying to make sure we get as many of those over as possible.
Because
And we have to
they'll
fight
be
with Joe
your
on
eyes
some
and
of them.
ears.
Yeah,
they'll be
absolutely.
your
And they know our kids.
Tom and I are going to duke it out.
You duke it out for Carol, boy, I'll tell you.
Now, there are talks about making sure that we move people, and they're increasing our staff with different folks coming from Harrison, and we're trying to make sure that in the hallways with the hall monitors, we've got somebody. Depending on office staff is a slightly different thing, how we do that. There's other pieces that fit into that.
The office staff has changed, so it doesn't matter. There's no anchor in Harrison anymore, so that doesn't matter. But your security guards, do the best you can, because those people know hundreds of kids.
Well, and I'll
They
tell
know them better than you guys do.
George and the board have been very gracious. They easily could have said, you got your hall monitors. We get an increase in our hall monitors, which
Yeah.
we're going to need, but we didn't have to fight for it or ask for it.
Yeah.
It was there when, nope, that's in the package.
And I think I want to be clear in terms of the traveling and the sharing of spaces. We're not talking about every hour somebody's moving from classroom A to classroom B to classroom C. I think based on what I'm seeing, the realistic scenarios are, as Joe said, teacher teaches 3 hours in the morning in one classroom, 2 hours in the afternoon in the other, vice versa, or something like that, where they're not totally losing the sense of a home base. They don't have one classroom that's their classroom, but they still have instructional space that they can stake some ownership in.
Thank you. Will there be an increase in administration at the two schools?
Yes, there will. It looks like an additional assistant principal at both buildings.
And
Back to Wood Creek.
He's on loan, that's it.
if there aren't any other cards to be turned in, then this is the last question. So, what is the perception of the IB program and its teachers at Farmington? Is it being well received?
Oh, great. So, of course, I have a couple teachers in the back of the room, so if I say anything that you disagree with, feel free to stand up and make me look foolish. I think that there are two things that I consistently hear from our teaching staff at Farmington. One is a concern that those IB teachers who are IB trained are going to come in the building and they're going to bump them out of their jobs and displace them. I think that's a very real feeling that a lot of our staff at Farmington have that could be clouding judgments or perceptions about IB. I think there's also a real feeling that IB will come in and kill existing AP programs. That existing well-established AP programs are no longer going to be existing because students are going to go to IB as well. So personally, I think that both of those fears, as real as they are and as many of my staff feel that way, I think that as this transition goes along, we're going to find those fears to be unfounded, and staff is going to be ready to embrace the program. Megan, go ahead.
I'm actually at Farmington, and we've heard this a little bit, that the narrative might be out there that we're not supportive of IB, or we don't want them, or it's an us and them kind of situation. And part of what we're concerned about is that not be the narrative, that we want to promote that we're excited, to see IB kids more, and we want those cultures to meld as seamlessly as possible. I think, like Mr. Shelton said, some of the concerns stem from staffing and how that will shake out. One of the other things I know that we've been concerned about that has come up tonight is that
the equity of class sizes. You know, if you're an IB teacher that has a couple of those smaller classes, you know, and you've got a schedule that's, depending on how many IB classes you're getting in your schedule, you're running a class potentially with 6 or 10 kids or something in it. And routinely I teach AP and regular general English. I can just kind of speak for my class sizes. But my class sizes are pretty routinely 28 now. And that's pretty indicative of what we'll see across the board. And so I think one of the fears is, you know, particularly as we juggle not having classroom space, being shuffled around, all of that is seeing some of that in terms of an equity issue. We get the rigors of IB. I'm not downplaying that. I don't want to make it seem like, oh, IB teachers have it so easy, you know. We understand that there's a real rigor to that. On the flip side of that is we'll get a general ed English classroom, you know, with 30 kids in it, and you might have 14 or 15 special ed kids in there. And so it's difficult for us to balance the needs of those types of classrooms when we see IB classes being run at 7. And the workload that comes with a writing class of 30 and, you know, another class that's got 7 or 8 in it. And so that's where some of that it comes from as well. And not ever having had the opportunity to be IB trained or really knowing what that program entails, it's difficult for me to speak a little bit more to like what IB will be. But we see it sometimes in terms of the numbers. And that's frustrating for us because we're just, there's so much that's changing at Farmington. Again, like you spoke to Harrison, we totally get the stresses of that staff, but I think at Farmington we're concerned with seeing numbers of, you know, several hundred kids coming to join the ranks next year and worried about how that will impact, you know, the culture as a whole. You know, we want it to be successful and seamless for everybody, but we're struggling with that in terms of the classrooms. We're struggling with that in terms of seeing some of the equity issues. And we haven't heard a lot in terms of how that would be addressed otherwise. So that's kind of where some of that anxiety comes from too. So if you hear some of the IB things, you know, I can really only speak for the people I know, but I think that that's where some of that anxiety comes from, if that helps at all, I guess.
It does help. I'm glad you did say that because we definitely heard it. But one thing I do want to just say is, I don't know if you said it, but that small class size has been just this last year because of the way it is, it's not normal. But since you're not real well versed on the IB, I encourage you just to look at it. Like even go to International Academy as a parent, I didn't know, so I did pursue that. And when the district made this choice, even at International Academy, they're not at 30. You know, the rigor of that class is so different than even an AP class because it's a 2-year class. So, will it hurt the AP? Probably not, because what kid wants to sign up for 2 years, you know, of the same class? But I encourage you to look at that because even at the IA, they're like at 18 to 24 sometimes, you know, but, you know, it's never going to be equitable as far as the numbers. And unless the district decides to get rid of the IB program or change it or make our own.
I totally get that. I think we just want to see, the district pushes so hard in terms of the achievement gap and the data and the testing, and we would love to see.
That's a district.
Yeah, oh yeah, I'm not blaming that on IB, I'm just saying like it's difficult when we hear so much about the achievement gap and the testing
but
and the rigor.
But the teachers do hear it, the kids do hear it.
Yeah, and we want to see we just want to see, it'd be nice to see an evening, right? Like if we're going to run some smaller IB classes because to accommodate that rigor, it would be great to see some of that in our classes where we're running 30 kids with 15 of them on an IEP or a 504.
I'm just saying for the 7 that you're saying, I think that was just this last year. Because my older son was never.
Or you have for chemistry, that could be 5 in one class and 36
There's
in another
36 in
because of the way the
because
class
of the
is lined
schedule.
up. So I mean, it's not.
So really, it's because of the schedule. You know, but the HL teachers teaching 35 and 1.
Yeah. We've just seen some of the numbers this year, and it's hard because we don't always know. You know, we just know what we see on the scheduling when it comes out. And so some of those classes, you know, we're seeing a chem class run at 17, or we're seeing, you know, physics or something. I don't know all the numbers offhand, sorry. But we see some of those lower numbers for next year, and so that's
because it's a 2-year class. So what you're seeing is the juniors, because of the class sizes, they go into the 2nd year of that. They can't add more kids to it if it's a 2-year program. But I think it'll change.
I was going to go back the IB program goes in November
Okay.
for 6 or 8 years. And oddly enough, our AP
the IB classes, so sophomores were taking classes in case they wanted to do it, and then maybe would decide not to and then go AP instead because they didn't want to do a 2-year physics,
Okay.
so they do the 1-year AP physics or whatever.
I've been asked for this to be the last comment, so just as a point of interest, our IB English classes last year were running at 33, okay, and some classes as chemistry have been very high. Also, as I mentioned earlier, we took a dip this year, and because we took a dip this year, it's going to flow into next year, but I really do think that the smaller class sizes that you are seeing is a temporary thing, and I think that those are only going to go up. Also, regarding the feeling of coming to Farmington and the perception there, when I came to Harrison, I had a target on my back. They did not want me there. They did not want IB there. Even I think Jordan one of our alumni could tell you, and it was a AP-IB thing, but as time went on, I do believe it transformed Harrison for the most part. You're not going to always have everybody on board, but I just think once everybody just gets used to it and gets settled down and keep our purpose as being what's best for each of our students, whether it's AP, IB, the IB career program that's coming, whatever it is, the people will find their place. We just need to make sure that we support all of our students.
Well, it sounds like the Farmington High School teachers need a little education in what the IB program is about as well. The ones that won't be teaching it to know the rigor and all the extra hours that those IB teachers put into it.
And maybe the
That they don't
opportunity to
see.
train. 'Cause that
Exactly.
was part of the
Bring them in.
experience too, right?
Bring them in.
They
Amen.
weren't ever given that opportunity.
They
because
should
were
be.
at-
Well, you're getting special ed classes and IB, it's gonna be rocking in Farmington next year.
It is. Place
And
everybody's
at the
gonna
end
wanna
of the
be.
day, it's a great community, so, you know, people mean well, we've heard great stuff about Farmington teachers, we've heard great things about North teachers, the principals are loved, been through counselors, so, at the end of the day, if you take your issue to the people and to those in charge, I've rarely ever heard, ever, whether you're IB or you have a special needs kid with I've rarely ever heard of somebody not getting something resolved to or at least the due diligence of the effort. So on that, kudos to it's a good day to be in Farmington, even with changes and adjusting, so thank you.
As we wrap up your final comment, there's just one more.
Yeah,
comment back there.
so there was a comment about like teachers being concerned about bumping because of IB certifications. I want to say that that is not like animosity of like non-IB certified against IB certified, because the decision to choose who got to teach IB predates Dr. Heisch's arrival here in the district. If you were already teaching at Harrison, you were given priority, and so that if there's bitterness about that, it is not aimed collegially, it is aimed at the prior decision-making team who ruled out people who simply were in other buildings from teaching at it and never had the opportunity to actually do it. Now, I know the district has offered the opportunity for people to get IB training, but if you're someone like me, who's on the downhill side of the career, like, you know, that's an extra thing you really have to decide you're gonna commit yourself to avoid that bump. So I just want to be clear that, like, as staff members arrive that are IB teachers at Farmington, there's not going to be like, you know, this, oh, you're IB certified, and you know that might have bumped some. We all understand how that decision was made, so there is no way that I cannot see that causing any kind of like staff dissension, because that's not really a result of any decisions made by staff.
Because we're running out of battery power. TV10.
So I'd like to thank everyone for coming and spending the evening to learn more about the transition, and I'd like to thank everyone on the panel.
Thank you.
And with that, we'll go ahead and